Becoming a spacefaring species has been the topic of many science fiction novels, video games, films, and many other mediums for centuries among humans. Many believe that the next step of the human story is among the stars, and the novel The Invincible by Stanislaw Lem makes the reader question this idea. In the 1964 novel, Stanislaw poses philosophical questions about humanity's feelings of entitlement to everything from the Earth to outer space, forcing you to reevaluate humanity's dominion. Lem's novel was adapted into a video game that shares the same name decades after in 2023. The Invincible is a narrative-driven video game offering a story that lasts about 6 hours and can end in multiple different ways due to its branching narrative and player choices. In today's video, I would like to offer my own opinions on the story, gameplay, and other mechanics, and at the end I'll summarize my thoughts and if I think the game is worth picking up for yourself. Since The Invincible is one of those games that rely heavily on the story, I'd rather not do my usual lore view format and would like to instead offer a new kind of video that is essentially a review full of my own opinions about what I think was done well and what I think could be improved without spoiling too much of the story in case any of you decide to pick up the game after watching the video. Although, fair warning, there are very minor spoilers towards the end of the video. Now with that said, I welcome you to a new series aptly named RearView. This will differ from my lore view series and will focus less on the lore and story and act more as a review of the game as a whole, and will also be a shorter video than the usual lore view duration. Anyways, I hope you'll enjoy this first episode of RearView on the game The Invincible, and let's get into it. The Invincible has you playing as an astrobiologist named Yasna, who is part of a crew currently on an exploration mission in space. Yasna has woken up on an unknown planet with no memory of getting there and nobody else around her. The story throughout the game will revolve around you figuring out what happened to get you here, finding your fellow crewmates and uncovering the mysteries of the planet you found yourself on, all while trying your best to escape the surface of it. To do this, you'll be using tools like a telescope, beacon scanner, and a land rover found later in the game, all of which are done in an atom punk aesthetic as well as the rest of the technology and buildings you'll find in the game. After waking up, Yasna can hear a static-filled voice coming from the comms but cannot reply as her transmitter is shot. That voice coming from the comms is the leader of Yasna's crew, Navik. He will be able to speak to you when the comms are repaired and will try to guide you on your mission throughout the game. Yasna then checks her journal, where she has written a plethora of information previously, including that the planet they are on is known as Regis 3, which is odd to Yasna since that was not one of the planets the crew was tasked with surveying. Further in the journal, there is also a map that shows a camp set up nearby, presumably by your own crew, and that will be your first objective. If you explore the starting area before moving towards the camp, you can encounter a pool of water or some other unknown liquid which triggers a flashback. Flashbacks will appear often and are usually related to the events or locations you happen upon during your playthrough. These flashbacks will be very important as they serve to further your understanding of what has happened since landing on Regis 3. In my opinion, the flashbacks are a nice way of having a visual recounting of what has happened without having to pick up mysteriously recorded or placed video or audio logs, which keeps the immersion in line a bit, but I also felt that they broke the pace of the game and may have lost my attention a few times throughout it, with some of the flashbacks not really adding much of value and were ultimately forgettable. Another thing I noticed during some of the flashbacks is the lack of responsiveness in the NPC's body language and facial expressions. There was one flashback in particular where one character, Merritt, was just looking off into space as the rest of the crew went on talking, although I will add that the voice acting in the game is very good. Either way, the behavior of the fellow crew members' bodies and faces left a lot to be desired, especially in a game trying hard to immerse the player within it. On the other hand, as I was walking down the hill to get to that pool, I found myself in awe at the attention to detail within the game, which might sound odd having just commented on a lack of attention with my previous statement. But besides the NPCs, the game world was shown great attention. There was dust flowing off the ledges of the environment, my character's feet were leaving non-uniform footsteps in the desert planet's ground, and as you approach a ledge, instead of just walking or jumping down it, Yasna has a climbing animation that must occur before you get to the bottom. Not to mention the beautiful skyboxes throughout the game that really cement that feeling of being on an alien planet. Now I know I noted the climbing animations like they were positive things, which in an immersion aspect they were, but I would argue that the climbing animations felt kind of clunky, like when you are faced with a cliff that you must get to the top of. For every single hand grab onto the rock face you have to click the W key. I felt like this could have been done better, as you might see in other games like when climbing up a ladder. I don't think this helped with my immersion and may have even hindered a bit. This landed into the pile of another mechanic that I felt broke the pace and immersion of the game, especially since every time I wanted to go up or down a ledge, I had to find the exact position to be in and then tap the forward key and wait for the animation. This brings me to my next point, the pace of the game. The game is grindingly slow in the beginning, with it having you do seemingly small tasks for not much of a reward. However, towards the end of the game, I will admit, the pace picked up and had me in its grips, eager to move forward. There are only a few places in the game where you gain a new ability or mechanic, usually just picking something up from a fellow crew member or grabbing something of use out of Yasna's pack when the situation warranted it. So most of the things that you do are just to further the story, which maybe should be expected while playing a story-driven game, but I can't say that most of these tasks kept me engaged. Another additive to the game's pacing is the minimal difference between sprinting and walking, which adds up throughout the game because you'll be on foot for most of it and will have to walk pretty far between objectives. Oh, and you have an invisible stamina bar that runs out quicker than the stock of scalper-targeted products. Continuing on, since I'm done talking about the pace of the story, I'll move on to the story itself, which was the main attraction to me for the game, having known a little bit about the book before seeing the game. I think the story is intriguing and is the main reason I picked up the game. I thought the storytelling was done well, either through the discussion of other characters, flashbacks, or notes left on devices. The story always had me wanting to know more. Now, I will admit, part of that feeling may have been because of the pace at which the game drip-fed you the story, but I will digress and stop talking about the pace for once. I loved the thought-provoking questions the story poses to the character, just like Lem's book. There were a few times I stopped my game and thought about what it was trying to tell me, what it was trying to have me question. And this is something that the game does well. Throughout the entire game, the planet does a fantastic job at making you feel unwelcome, and you'll even find the unnerving quote from the trailer in one of the final areas reading, "Not everything everywhere is for us," adding to the feeling that you shouldn't be there. There are dangerous sandstorms occurring regularly, a harsh landscape that is difficult to traverse, and even an unusual form of life that seems to be inorganic and is able to sustain itself on the dead planet. As you explore the planet and gather your crewmates, you'll find that your crew isn't the only spacefaring group on the desert rock. There's actually another group who is known to be not so friendly towards Star Wars Industries, the company your crew works for. I found this to add another level to that feeling of hopelessness offered up by the game. You feel even more unwelcome knowing that there is a hostile group who has already set up base on the planet and will most likely not be receptive to your plea for help. I think this is one of the things the game did right and kept me on my toes after finding this out. The feeling that you have nowhere to turn and must keep moving forward, even with the sliver of hope that you might still have to escape the dangers of the planet. At times throughout the game, I even got the feeling that the one person I thought I could trust in the game, Navik, Yasna's leader in the comms, knew more information than what he was telling me, leading me to question everything even further. All of this compounded into one dreadful feeling, not knowing if you would ever get back to home on Earth. Overall, there were lots of things I liked about this game, the voice acting, the beautiful environment, the suspense of the story, to name a few. But on the other hand, there was a lot that I didn't feel very right about either. The pacing, as I talked about in detail, the clunky vertical movement which hinders the pacing and the immersion instead of doing the opposite as I think it was meant to do. And even something I didn't mention earlier was that there seemed to be some sound effects missing where they should have been. This was also amplified by the rest of the game being so attentive to detail. An example I can think of that stood out to me was when a character threw away an object and didn't have an impact sound effect when it hit the ground. Admittedly, this is not a huge deal, and it's just something that I took note of instead of paying attention to what was going on in the game. I did like the idea of having multiple endings and seeing how my decisions throughout the story created the ending I got, though it all falls short since I was never compelled to replay the game and experience those different endings. In order to get a different ending, I would have had to either replay the entire slogging beginning part of the game and choose differently during defining decisions, or load up the chapter where the first defining choice was made and play through to the end making different choices. Either way, I just didn't feel like it would have been worth it to me and ultimately decided to just watch a video that included all the endings. There's a lot to like and a lot to dislike about the game, but in the end, I didn't regret having paid for the game or having played through it. I just wouldn't do it again given the choice. So would I recommend that you pick up the game? Sure, but just keep in mind what you'll be getting into, be flexible with the gameplay, and maybe even pick it up on sale like I did. With that being said, I know this is a shorter video and there will be longer videos coming out soon. I've got another one in the works. But I'd like to thank you for making it to the end of this one, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.